Hello and a very warm welcome to Wednesday Wandering with me, Cate Field. Wondering about things creative, spiritual and quietly fascinating, and not just wandering off. If you are new to my channel, huge welcome to you. I share art tutorials every Monday and Friday, and this little reflective wandering each Wednesday. It's just a few moments to pause, to breathe, and to explore how art and life speak to one another. I do hope you are well. I am recovering from a cold, so forgive me if I'm a bit croaky today. As we move deeper into October here in Dorset in the West Country of England, the air has definitely got that unmistakable scent of wood smoke, which is really nice, and the windfall apples, which we are gathering to make chutney. The fields are gathered in, the light softens, and there's a bit of a hush that feels both complete and expectant. It's one of those wonderful things. It's a time of gathering, not just crops, but thoughts, memories, and ideas. This week, I have been reflecting on the harvest of ideas. The creative gathering that happens when we stop, when we look back, and realise how much has quietly grown. Our saint this week is St. Luke. His feast day falls on the 18th of October, and he is the patron saint of artists, writers, and physicians. Luke was a healer, a man who noticed things that others missed. A physician's skill is observation, noticing the subtle shifts, the small signs of recovery, the change in a patient's colour or breath. And Luke carried that same attentiveness into his writing. Luke is a fascinating figure to reflect upon, an artist, a writer and traveller, and above all, an observer. Tradition tells us that he was a Greek physician, educated, meticulous and curious about the human condition. He wasn't one of the 12 apostles, but a companion of Paul. And he joined Paul on one of those journeys across the Mediterranean. And you can sense that traveller's mind in his writing. His Gospel and the Acts of the Apostles have a keen descriptive eye, I think, as though he's sketching while he's writing. A physician's first duty is observation, to notice what others miss, the slight change in colour, the deep breath of relief, the moment healing begins or declines. And that, I think, is precisely what Luke brought to his gospel. He noticed, he paid attention. Luke saw the overlooked. His gospel gives extraordinary attention to women. Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary and Martha, who welcomed him into their home, and the women who stood by the cross and went to the tomb. No other gospel writer gives them such dignity, I think, or such presence. He includes the Magnificat, Mary's song of radical hope, and the parable of the lost coin, told from a woman's point of view. Luke's writing is a compassionate harvest. He gathers stories that others left behind. He preserves tenderness, moments of healing, a meal shared, a word of forgiveness. He writes like someone who sees the divine in the detail, who understands that the sacred hides in small gestures, the laying on of hands, the breaking of bread, the noticing of pain. And I often think that Luke would have made a wonderful painter, and he may well have painted, but we just don't know. Tradition suggests that he was, and that he was an iconographer, painting the Virgin and Child, but whether or not that's true, or perhaps it doesn't matter. You can feel his painter's eye in the way he layers meaning. The light falling on faces, gestures captured by mid-action. The compassion illuminated. And in that sense, Luke becomes the patron not only of artists and writers, but of all who see, who observe quietly, those who notice beauty in the overlooked corners of life. Luke's Gospel reminds us that creativity begins with attention. Before we can make or write or paint, we must look, and look with love. So when we speak of the harvest of ideas, perhaps what we really mean is this: noticing, gathering what is already growing around us, the small, the quiet, the nearly missed, and honouring that with our attention. So from this physician's eye, let's move to Vanessa Bell, the English painter whose courage was colour itself. Bell and her Bloomsbury circle rejected the grey respectability of Victorian life. At her home, Charleston, she didn't just hang paintings, she painted her fireplaces, her furniture, the door frames. The whole house became a work of art, a living, breathing canvas. It was domestic daring, the belief that art should not be confined to galleries and to canvases, but woven through the everyday. Vanessa Bell was born in 1879 into a world that expected women to be decorative, not daring. She grew up in London in the late Victorian era, a time of heavy drapery, strict manners, and artistic hierarchy, and yet from a very early age she had both a painter's eye and a questioning mind. When her parents died, Vanessa and her sister, Virginia, oh yes, that Virginia Woolf, gathered a circle of friends that would become the Bloomsbury Group. A really extraordinary meeting of artists, writers and thinkers who rejected the rigid moralism of the age. They believed in beauty, honesty, friendship and freedom, both in thought and in love. And for Vanessa, this freedom expressed itself in colour. She trained at the Royal Academy schools where the teaching was conservative, focused on drawing from plaster casts, but she was drawn to post-impressionism, to the emotional colour and bold shape of Matisse and Cézanne. When Roger Fry's Manet and the Post-Impressionists exhibition opened in London in 1910, it changed her life. She later said it felt like a revelation of how painting could be. And Vanessa Bell brought that revelation home, literally. Her farmhouse in Sussex, Charleston, became her masterpiece. Alongside her partner, Duncan Grant, she transformed it into a living artwork. Every surface was touched by paint. The walls, the tables, the fireplaces, like I said before, even the lampshades. Walking through Charleston today, because it is open, you can go and see it, you feel the joy of that experiment. Every room hums with pattern and warmth. Circles of ochre and turquoise dance across the floors and the doors and the walls, and painted jugs and handmade curtains. These all kind of dissolve that boundary between art and life. It was a radical act for a woman of her time. She made the domestic sphere her studio, not in submission, but in defiance. And in a world that diminished women's creativity as hobby or decoration, she proved that the home could be a site of bold invention. And yet her art wasn't loud, it was contemplative. Her portraits and still lifes are full of silence and poise. She often painted those that she loved. Virginia Woolf reading, Duncan, her husband, at work, friends gathered in quiet companionship. These paintings feel like harvests of intimacy, I think, moments preserved, the radiant stillness. Vanessa Bell reminds us that creativity doesn't need permission or grandeur. It can begin at the breakfast table and the colour that you choose for a wall, or in the way that you arrange flowers in a jug, or the way that you do your gardening. Her courage was not in shouting, but in steady claiming space, colour, and joy. Perhaps the truest mark of her harvest is this: she made art inseparable from life itself. The table became like an altar, a room becomes the painting, and the simple act of living was an ongoing, vibrant composition that gave her absolute freedom. Next, I'd like to have a little wonder about Faith Ringgold, the American artist and storyteller whose harvest was made of fragments. Her story quilts, vibrant, patterned, defiant, tell the stories that history tried to tear apart. She took scraps of fabric, remnants of clothing, pieces of cloth once cast aside, and she stitched them into her truth. Faith Ringgold was born in Harlem in 1930 at a time when the neighbourhood was still glowing with the afterlight of the Harlem Renaissance. Music, poetry and art pulsed through the streets, Duke Ellington's melodies drifting from the dance halls, Langston Hughes reading in cafes. But Ringgold's world was also shadowed by segregation and the struggle for black voices to be heard and seen in American art. She grew up in a home filled with craft. Her mother, Willie Posey, was a fashion designer and seamstress, and from her, Faith learned that fabric could tell stories. Thread, pattern and colour weren't simply decorative, they were language. After studying art at college, she began teaching painting and protesting, often at the same time. By the 1960s, she was creating bold, confrontational paintings that addressed racial injustice and the civil rights movement. Looking at her work is just quite extraordinary. Her American People series in particular depicted the uneasy realities of race and gender in modern America, portraits of crowds and conflict that forced viewers to confront inequality head on. But Faith Ringgold was also a mother, and as her work evolved, she began to fuse that political view with the personal. And in the late 1970s and 80s, she turned to textiles, specifically to the tradition of quilting, a form long associated with women's communal creativity. She began to paint directly onto fabric and then border her images with hand-sewn frames of patterned cloth, often stitched by her mother. These became her story quilts, radiant, layered narrative works that combined painting, text and fabric. Her most famous quilt, Tar Beach from 1988, depicts a young girl floating above a Harlem rooftop, arms outstretched, dreaming of freedom and flight. The image is once whimsical and profound, a declaration that imagination itself is liberation. The girl in Tar Beach is Faith's alter ego, if you like, reclaiming the sky, denied to her ancestors. She can't sit around waiting for someone to say who you are. You need to write it and paint it and do it. That's exactly what she did. Her materials, scraps, remnants, cloth once discarded, became like metaphors for the histories that she was reclaiming. Her quilts are harvests of resilience. I know I keep coming back to this harvest metaphor. Each patch, each piece of thread speaks of survival, community and love. And they echo the African American women who quilted for warmth and memory, piecing together beauty from scarcity. Faith Ringgold took that inheritance and elevated it to fine art, insisting that women's work, black work, was world-changing work. And when I think about her, I think about the courage of mending, the patience of someone who takes what is torn and makes it whole again. It's such a powerful image for this season, I think, this season of gathering. Perhaps our own harvests are not only what we've grown, but what we've repaired. The faith, the perseverance and the love that we've patiently stitched into our own creative lives when the fabric frayed. Her work stands as proof that mending is as radical. It's a really radical artistic act, which I really like. So your creative invitations for writing. How about listing 3 overlooked stories or small act of kindness given or received that feel like the truest part of your year? Drawing. Create a still life of your own harvest table, not of food, but maybe of objects, of colours or textures that represent nourishment in your creative life. Or perhaps you'd like to do some needlework or some domestic tending. Like Vanessa Bell, bring a fragment of your creativity into your home. Paint a frame, stitch a small patch for your apron, or arrange a corner of your room to reflect your current abundance. You can share your reflections and your creations in our wonderful Friday Art and Doodle Club Facebook group. It's always inspiring to see how everyone interprets these gentle prompts. And you might be working through the October Traces project at the moment. The link to join is below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, because it helps me to grow the channel and to reach others who might like my little wanderings. Thank you so much to everyone who takes time to write thoughtful comments. You really are quite wonderful, and I feel that my voice is going now. So next week we'll gather in the twilight glow for shadows and candlelight, exploring how we keep our creative flame burning as the days grow darker here in the Northern Hemisphere. Until then, may your week be rich with quiet harvests, the kind that feeds both the heart and the imagination. Take care. Bye-bye.